My wife opened our marriage without telling me, so I got full-blown revenge on her. Dad, really? Mom's right, you really are a fool. Those were the last words I heard from my daughter before I hung up. Over the next few days, she sent texts and left voice messages, but I deleted them all after hearing the first few words. They echoed my ex-wife's sentiments. My daughter made her choice 10 years ago, and I see her attempts at reconciliation as insincere. I'm Tom Williams. I was married to Kayla Williams. We were together for 17 years until everything fell apart, and of course I got the blame. Our divorce courts are biased against men, always siding with the ex-wife and giving her full custody, letting her paint me as the villain. The divorce laws in this country seem to be written by people who hate men. We had 2 kids, a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. I thought everything was great. I loved my wife, and I believed she loved me. Our kids were smart, athletic, and well-behaved. Carly, our daughter, was a daddy's girl, and Josh, our son, was a friendly and athletic boy. I worked as a mechanical engineer, and Kayla was an accountant. We both kept fit and looked good. Carly idolized me and wanted to be an engineer like me. She got her driver's license on her 16th birthday and loved driving. She would help me in the garage from a young age, handing me tools while I worked on my car collection. We often went to car shows together, spending weekends immersed in our shared hobby. I was good at household chores, and Carly liked helping me. I taught her plumbing, electrical work, drywall, and painting. She even assisted with installing new appliances and laying a concrete slab. For most things, she came to me for advice and help, while she turned to her mom for girl issues. We were open and honest with each other, and she came to me when she was in trouble. Josh, on the other hand, wasn't into cars. He was a good student, excelling in English literature and social studies, and talked about becoming a lawyer. He was more attached to his mom than me. A few weeks ago, Kayla started acting distant and occasionally zoned out. When I asked if everything was okay, she brushed me off. It was Friday night when I got home from work at 6, and things felt off. There were no dinner smells, and Carly didn't greet me. I assumed the kids were out with friends. I put my briefcase in my office and went upstairs to change. In the bedroom, I found Kayla's black dress, lingerie, stockings, and heels laid out. It seemed we were going out, though she hadn't told me. She was in the bathroom applying makeup when I walked in. "Where are we going, honey?" I asked, taking off my shirt. "We're not going anywhere," she replied. "Then why are you wearing so much makeup and laying out a hot outfit?" "I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm going out." "Really? Where are you going, and where are the kids?" "The kids are spending the night with friends. I have a date, and I won't be back until morning." "A date? You're not coming back until morning?" "Exactly. If all goes well, I'll spend the night with him." "Are you insane? You can't expect me to put up with this. If you want to go out, wait until a divorce is final." "Stop being ridiculous. There won't be a divorce. I just need this one night to prove to myself that I'm still attractive. If you love me, you'll let me have this. If you loved me, you wouldn't even think about it. I love you, but I need this. I'm getting older and need to feel attractive. Clarence, who's 10 years younger, has been flirting with me, and I accepted his proposal. It's just one night to boost my confidence. I'm not putting up with this. Remember our wedding vows? If you do this, you're breaking them. It's just one night. Afterward, it'll be back to normal, I promise. Are you stupid, or do you think I am? If you break your vows, it's over. I'll see a lawyer immediately. Don't be an idiot. There will be no divorce. If you try, I'll fight you and make you lose everything. I'll get full custody of the kids and make them hate you. You say you love me but threaten all this? I do love you, but if you try to divorce me, I'll fight. I just need this one night. And what about in a few years when you feel the same way again? It won't happen again. It's just one night to satisfy my curiosity. Maybe I'll even learn something new to spice up our bed life. If you go through with this, our marriage is over. Cancel the date, and we can try marriage counseling. We'll talk about counseling when I get back tomorrow." She continued getting ready. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt and left the room. Later, she came downstairs in her outfit, clutching a small purse, and checked herself in the mirror by the door. I sat in the living room as a car horn honked outside. "He's here. I have to go now. I'll see you in the morning." She leaned in to kiss me, but I turned away and she kissed the air instead. She frowned at me. "Fine. Once you calm down, everything will be back to normal." With that, she turned to leave. I made one last plea. "If you walk out that door, it's over. Think twice about throwing away 17 years of marriage." She looked back at me. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'll be back, and everything will be fine." With that, she opened the door and left. I started crying, mourning the loss of my marriage and the woman I had loved exclusively for 20 years, 17 years of marriage, a year of engagement, and 2 years of dating. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. She never expressed any dissatisfaction. Our bed life was normal, and she never asked for more. I would have given her anything she wanted. We never fought, just had normal disagreements that we always resolved. I had already decided what to do if she left. Half an hour later, still waiting for her to come back, I finally got up and went to work. She didn't return, so I went upstairs to implement my plan. It wasn't great, but it was all I had. Our house had 4 bedrooms, the master bedroom, Carly's room, Josh's room, and a large guest bedroom with a private bathroom. I moved into the guest room. It took me 2 hours to move everything. I knew the divorce laws in our no-fault state favored the wife, meaning she'd likely get the house, the kids, alimony, and I'd be left with the bills. Settled in my new room, I went to our home office and logged into our online banking. Years ago, I opened an account in my name to buy gifts for her without ruining the surprise. Now, I decided to use it differently. I transferred half of our checking and savings to my personal account. Then I paid off and canceled all our credit cards and issued new ones in my name. I'd transfer my direct deposits at work on Monday and call our broker to split our investments. Having done what I could, I poured a glass of Jim Beam and went to bed. It was a rough night. The bed felt empty without her, and my mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently. Should I have tried to stop her? Confronted the guy with a baseball bat or a weapon? Was it worth going to jail? I barely slept, dozing off now and then. When morning light came through the window, I got up, took a shower, shaved, and dressed. I went downstairs, had breakfast, and read the paper with a couple of cups of coffee. At 9, Kayla returned. I was in my office, looking at apartments for rent. I had already researched attorneys and scheduled an appointment for Monday afternoon. "Good morning, sweetheart. I'm home, as promised," she said cheerfully as she entered. I ignored her. My anger had been building all night and morning. I realized I didn't deserve her disrespect, and there was nothing I could have done to stop her. It was her choice entirely. People say you can't stop loving someone suddenly, but you can turn that love into hate. Hate still has emotion. Indifference is the true opposite of love. By this morning, my love for her had turned to hate. I focused on her lack of respect, her threats, and her disregard for my feelings. "Honey, where are you?" "I'm home, just like I said," she called, searching for me. "There you are," she said, finding me in my office. "I'm back, and things can go back to normal." She reached out to hug and kiss me. I shoved her back. "Keep your filthy lips off me. God only knows what you've touched." Her eyes widened in shock. I'd never spoken to her like that before. "You need to go to the clinic and get a full set of STD tests. I want to see a notarized clean report." Her expression changed from shock to anger. "I'm going to our room to nap. I've had a long night. I hope you've calmed down and will apologize for your rudeness." I couldn't help but smile, anticipating her reaction. "What the hell did you do?" she yelled from upstairs. "Where are your clothes and toiletries?" She barged back into my office. "My things are exactly where they should be. Your closet and drawers are empty. Your side of the dresser is empty. Everything is in its place. My clothes are neatly in my new bedroom closet and dresser." "In my bedroom?" "Yes. I moved out of your bedroom. I'll live in my new room until I find an apartment and move out." I decided not to mention the finances yet. Let her figure it out. Her eyes narrowed. "We'll discuss this later. I'll give you a week to recover, then I'll put everything back to normal." "Not until I get a notarized report that you're free of all diseases," I said, turning back to the computer. I stayed in my office most of the day. The kids came home early. I wondered how long it would take them to notice something was wrong. I found some promising apartments, filled out forms, and scheduled viewings for Tuesday. I printed out our financial statements for my lawyer on Monday. Although I had no illusions about selling the house, knowing its value might help. I spent the rest of the day researching divorce laws in our state. I knew I'd get screwed over but needed to understand how badly. "Daddy, dinner's ready," Carly said, peeking through the door. "Okay, sweetie, thank you." Kayla greeted me in the kitchen with a radiant smile, trying to placate me with kindness and show me what I'd lose. She dressed up, did her hair, and spent a lot of time cooking my favorite meal. She offered me a glass of wine and leaned in for a kiss. I pulled away, seeing the pain in her eyes. I poured the wine down the sink, grabbed a tumbler, filled it with ice, and poured some Jim Beam. The kids noticed this as I joined them at the table, ignoring Kayla. Dinner was tense. I kept the kids talking, but it was clear we were in trouble. I didn't eat, just passed the dishes around and sipped my drink. "Dad, aren't you going to eat?" Josh finally asked. "No, not hungry," I replied. After the most awkward dinner ever, I refilled my glass and went back to my office. I didn't help clear the table. Half an hour later, I shut down my computer, grabbed my truck keys, and left for a quiet restaurant dinner. Afterward, I had a few drinks at a bar. When I got home late, I made enough noise closing my room door so Kayla could hear. I locked it and wedged a chair under the handle. She tried to get me to open it for about 5 minutes before giving up. The next morning, I got up early, deciding it was a soccer day. There were 3 games, and I planned to watch them all. There were chores to do, but I ignored them. I wouldn't be living here much longer, so Kayla could handle it. After almost finishing my coffee, I started making an omelet. I was just finishing when Carly walked into the kitchen. "Hi, sweetie. Want an omelet?" I asked. "Sure, Dad. Thanks." She took her juice and sat at the table. Josh came in a few minutes later, and I told him I'd make his omelet next. Carly ate while I cooked Josh's. When I heard Kayla in the hallway, I poured the last cup of coffee and turned off the kettle. She walked in, took a cup from the cupboard, and saw the empty pot. "You couldn't leave me a cup?" she asked. "The pot's right there. You know how to make it." "Never mind. So you're making scrambled eggs?" "Made them." "Feel free to make your own," I replied, handing Josh his plate. Then I walked out of the kitchen. Near noon, I was in the living room watching the game. Kayla brought a plate of food and a beer, setting them on the coffee table. "I brought you lunch and a beer so you won't miss any of the game," she said cheerfully. Without looking at her, I kicked the plate and bottle onto the floor. She stood in shock. During a commercial, I went to the kitchen for a beer. Yes, it was a waste, but I wasn't drinking anything she brought me. I didn't clean up. She brought it. She could clean it. "We need to discuss this," Kayla began. "Shut up. The game is on," I replied. "You need to fix your attitude. The kids have noticed. They'll notice when I move out." "You're not moving out, and there won't be a divorce," she insisted, walking away. Around noon, Carly and Josh came in together and sat facing me. "Dad, what's going on with you and Mom?" Carly asked. "Your mom and I are getting a divorce. It has nothing to do with you. We both love you. It's just between us." "But why?" Josh asked. "Because she did something I can't accept. Even after I told her how I felt, she did it anyway. She's not remorseful." "You mean her date on Friday night?" Carly asked. "You know about that?" I was surprised. "Yeah. Mom told us you weren't happy about it. So you know she cheated on me." "No, she didn't," Josh said. "She told you about it, so it wasn't cheating. She didn't sneak around, and it was only once." "Yes, Dad," Carly added. "She said if you really loved her, you'd let her have that night and move on." "Really? If she loved me, she wouldn't consider sleeping with anyone else." "Come on, Dad. It was just once, and she promised not to do it again," Carly said. "She made a vow to me 17 years ago in front of God and our families to forsake all others until death. If she can break that vow, how can I trust her private promises?" "But you vowed to be there for her in good times and bad," Josh said. "That's right, but she broke her vow, releasing me from mine." "We don't understand why you'd break up the family over one night," Carly said. "Why am I being blamed for what she did? She's not leaving, she wants to move on." "You're the one leaving and making a big deal out of it," Carly insisted. After that, things didn't improve. I tried explaining my position, but they wouldn't listen. Kayla had convinced the kids that Mom did what she needed to be happy, and Dad didn't love them enough to accommodate her. They believed my ego was tearing the family apart. They saw it as one night out of 20 years, insignificant compared to 7,305 nights together. When they realized I wouldn't accept their stance, they left, and I watched the rest of the game in peace. As dinner was being prepared, another favorite meal of mine, I ignored it and watched the postgame show. Josh came in and said dinner was ready. I grabbed my keys and headed out. "Where you going?" "Dinner's ready," Josh asked. "I'm going to the sports bar to watch the game and eat there," I replied. "But Mom fixed. I'll be back after the game." The sports bar had a good burger and seasoned fries. I had 1 beer per quarter, enough to drive the 5 minutes home. When I returned, everyone was in bed. The plate and bottle were gone from the coffee table, which made me smile. Monday morning, I left early and called my broker from the office to split our investments. I opened a new account and transferred half of our investments into it. Then I updated my HR records, removing Kayla from my retirement account and listing Carly and Josh as heirs. I also updated my direct deposit to my new account. I informed my boss about the divorce and needing time off. He was supportive. My lawyer confirmed custody would depend on the kids' preference, which didn't look promising based on our conversation. I spent Monday evening at the sports bar watching football and eating tacos. I ignored texts and calls from Kayla but told Carly where I was. She wasn't happy. When I got home, they all gave me dirty looks. I went to my office, and by the time I went to bed, everyone was asleep. Tuesday morning, I left early before anyone else was up. Work was fine, and I took the day off to look at apartments. I found a nice 2-bedroom place, put down a deposit, and planned to move in on Saturday. I bought a couch, table, and chairs from a thrift store to be delivered Saturday afternoon. I decided to take my current bed and home office items with me. When I got home, they were already eating dinner. They hadn't set a plate for me, which was fine since I wasn't planning to eat with them. I made a huge sandwich, grabbed chips and a beer, and headed to my office. "Dad, why are you being such an idiot?" Carly exclaimed, entering my office. "Your mother cheated on me, showed no respect, and threw it in my face. I made it clear what would happen if she did, and she did it anyway. You can't ruin our family over this. It was just sex." "Carly, imagine your future husband telling you he's going on a date with a younger woman and will spend the night with her. Would you be okay with that?" "I wouldn't like it, but if it was only once and he promised to come back, I'd hope I loved him enough to get over it. If he told me first, it wouldn't seem like cheating." "When you say your vows, imagine looking into your fiancé's eyes and telling him you're off to have fun with another man." I turned back to my work. Wednesday evening was an ambush. When I got home, both sets of parents were there. I understood why her parents would be on her side, but I was puzzled that my parents were there too. "Tom," Charles began, "Kayla's mother and I are disappointed in what she did, but you're overreacting. It was just one mistake in 20 years. You have 2 wonderful kids. Don't destroy your family over one incident. It wasn't a small mistake. It was a planned event. She told me just an hour before, giving me no chance to resist." "Son," Mom intervened, "she didn't cheat. She told you first. She didn't ask. She just told me. Even when I objected, she didn't care. I told her what would happen if she went through with it, and she did it anyway." "Tom," my father said, "I understand your pain and anger, but think of your family. We love you and are here to help you heal. Kayla still loves you and insists she won't do it again. With counseling and effort, you can overcome this. Tearing the family apart isn't the answer. Think of your mother and me. These are our grandchildren, and we'll do whatever it takes to maintain a relationship with them." I was stunned. My parents were on her side, telling me to accept her cheating. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and walked to my bedroom, shutting the door in Kayla's face. 10 minutes later, I changed into jeans, a casual shirt, and boots. I walked through the living room and out the door without saying a word, ignoring their attempts to talk to me. I drove to the sports bar for dinner and a few beers. When I returned about 4 hours later, the house was quiet and dark. Thursday and Friday were the same. I ignored Kayla, and the kids were still mad at me. Kayla hadn't noticed the credit cards weren't working yet, but she would when she went shopping on Saturday. Friday night, I was in my office, sorting through my things, deciding what to take the next day. Kayla entered, wearing a see-through nightgown, stockings, garter belt, and heels. She looked amazing. "The kids are sleeping elsewhere tonight. It's time to forget this nonsense and come to bed with me. I need you to take me back." "No, thank you. Besides, I haven't seen the clinic report confirming you're clean." "Stop being ridiculous. I need you back in my bed. Your tantrums aren't helping." "Now come on, I'm passionate and need sex." "Not interested. If you don't, I'll call Clarence again." "So what if it's a one-time thing?" "It was a one-time thing, but if you keep rejecting me, you're pushing me to someone else." "Have fun. Let me know if you bring him here so I can leave." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I heard the front door slam and her tires screech as she drove off. I took advantage of the empty house to gather my things. I disassembled the bed and loaded it into the truck along with most of my clothes. I slept on the couch in my office that night. Early the next morning, I went to the leasing office to get my apartment key. It took a while, but I moved everything from the truck into the apartment with help from friendly neighbors. When I got back, the house was still empty. A neighbor's teenage son helped me load my desk and office furniture into the truck. I moved the computer, printer, and accessories, and decided to take the chair too. Either no one came home or they didn't notice my office and spare bedroom were empty. In the evening, my phone rang. It was my daughter. "Daddy, where are you?" "I'm home, honey." "No, you're not. Your office is empty. The bed and dresser are gone from the spare bedroom, and your chair isn't in the living room. Plus, your truck is gone." "You're right, I'm not there. I've moved into an apartment. Maybe after the divorce I'll buy a house, but this will do for now." "Geez, Dad, I can't believe you're being so stupid. I thought you loved us." "I do love you, sweetheart. Always have, and always will. Just not enough to stay with us. I'm not leaving you. You'll still see me as much as you want. I'll still take care of you and your brother. You abandoned us and are destroying the family. Your mother is the one who destroyed the family. I told her what would happen if she went on that date, but she did it anyway. But she thought you loved her enough to get over it, and I thought she loved me enough not to do it." "Okay, whatever." She hung up. The divorce was a nightmare. She fought it to the end. "Counseling? She wanted me to pay. I refused. I argued she should pay if she needed it. That was one of the few arguments I won. The counselor didn't like me because I told him I was ordered to attend but didn't have to participate. I endured all 12 sessions before he gave up. She fought over everything, even things she hated, just to make the divorce harder. She limited my time with the kids as much as possible. Eventually, the judge granted the divorce. I had to pay half the mortgage, child support of $2,000 a month, and $1,000 a month in spousal maintenance for 5 years unless she remarried. She moved Clarence in before the divorce was finalized. Half my paycheck went to her. I cashed out investments to buy a small house needing renovation. I got it cheap and moved in with my tools. The house had basic utilities, and I worked on it in the evenings and weekends. Visitation was a disaster. Kayla did everything to prevent it. The kids were always busy or away on my weekends. They had activities or tests on Wednesdays. When I did see them, they treated me with hostility and blamed me for everything. Kayla had turned them against me. I sent gifts, cards, and letters for birthdays and Christmas, but they were returned unopened. I kept sending monthly checks, which were cashed, but I never heard a word. I guess they graduated, but I heard nothing. I informed them of college funds but got no response. Kayla set my kids against me as she promised. I focused on work in the house, avoiding other activities. I saved a lot of money this way, but it was a hard and lonely time. "Hi, Mom," I said when she answered. "Tom, how are you?" she replied cheerfully. "I'm okay. I haven't heard anything about Thanksgiving. Are you hosting again this year?" There was silence. "Mom, are you there?" I asked. "Well, this is awkward." "Yes, we're hosting, but Kayla, her parents, and the kids are coming. She's bringing her new boyfriend. We thought it would be too awkward if you were here too. The kids are still mad at you, and having you and Kayla's new man together would stress everyone out. So you're ditching your own son for Thanksgiving and inviting my ex-wife and her boyfriend instead? We want to stay close to our grandchildren. Besides, this is your fault for not keeping the family together. How about visiting us on Christmas Eve? Your father and I will spend Christmas Day at Kayla's." "Whatever," I muttered, ending the call. I spent Christmas Eve at home watching Die Hard and ignored my mom's calls and texts. I wasn't in the holiday mood, especially after the packages I sent to my kids were returned unopened. 5 years later, I got a wedding announcement. Kayla had married Clarence the weekend after I made my last maintenance payment. Josh turned 18 a year early, so I was done with child support. I was finally free of obligations to my ex-family and celebrated by getting drunk. I wasn't proud of it, but I gave them all my love, and they rejected me. Now I was focused on moving on with my life. I still had to pay half the mortgage, but my name was on the deed. The divorce allowed Kayla to live there only until the kids graduated high school. With Josh's graduation, I was entitled to half the property's value. I contacted my attorney. The house, initially appraised at $300,000 with $200,000 in equity, was now worth about $500,000 with $450,000 in equity. I was due my half, which would be around $250,000. I wanted the money and also to annoy Kayla. A week later, Kayla called. "Tom, what the hell is going on?" "Not much, just working and fixing up my house. Why are you calling?" "You idiot! Why did a realtor come to my house to get my signature for a sale? Since both our names are on the title, your signature is needed for the sale." "What sale? I'm not selling this house." "Then write me a check for my half of the equity. I got the house in the divorce." "No, you got to live there until Josh graduated. Now we can either sell it and split the proceeds, or you can buy out my half. I'm not giving you $100,000 for a house I own." "Good thing I'm not asking for $100,000. The equity is about $450,000 now, so my half is $225,000, including all the furniture. Let's round it up to $250,000. "You're crazy! I'm not giving you a dime," she shouted, hanging up. I laughed when she hung up. My lawyer got his cut, but it was worth it to see her face when the judge ruled in my favor a couple of months later. The judge even made her pay her legal fees and mine for bringing a case that should have been settled out of court. The house appraised higher than I expected, including the furniture's value. I got $275,000. They bought me out, mostly using Clarence's money, which later got him in trouble. I fixed up my house and built a decent-sized shop behind it. I bought a 1972 Chevy pickup in bad shape, mainly for the chassis. Over the last year, I took it apart, cleaned it, and repainted it. When the bodywork was done, I worked on the running gear, rebuilding the rear differential and installing a BorgWarner T10 4-speed manual transmission. I had fun with the engine, a 427 big block, which I found online and had shipped. I took it apart, sent it to a machine shop for modifications, and added a supercharger. I polished the aluminum and chromed the valve covers, making it shine. The first time I drove it, I almost wrecked it. I floored it on the highway, blowing out the rear tires. I learned to take it slow on the gas pedal after that. A few weeks later, I saw an ad for a car show and decided to enter. I loaded up the '72 Chevy and drove to the park, registered, and got my spot. I noticed a nice 1968 GTO parked next to me. As I set up my shade structure, chairs, and refrigerator, I saw two attractive red-headed women setting up chairs behind the GTO. One looked my age, and the other was about 10 years old. Importantly, I noticed there was no man with them and no ring on the older woman's finger. "Good morning. I like your car," I said cheerfully. "Hi, thanks. I like your truck too," said the older one. "Thanks. Have you been to many of these events?" "This is my first time participating. I'm Tom, by the way." "This is our third time. My ex used to host it before. I'm Marie, and this is my daughter, Jenny. Why don't you two join me in the shade when you're done? I have drinks and could use some tips about these shows." We spent most of the day together, occasionally talking to people about our cars. It was very enjoyable. No, I didn't win any awards, but I had fun. Marie mentioned, "I divorced my husband 3 years ago because I caught him cheating." "Who was he cheating with?" I asked. "His boss's wife," she replied. She made a deal she'd give him all the videos if he signed the GTO over to her. She wanted him to keep his job to pay alimony. It was a double win for her, she said. Jenny joined in, saying she was angry at her father and had nothing to do with him anymore. As the show wound down, I suggested, "How about dinner at Red Lobster nearby?" They agreed. Over dinner, I shared my story. My kids sided with my wife and wanted nothing to do with me. Jenny was stunned. "She cheated and they blame you?" "Yes, she turned them against me," I said. Marie put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Tom. You don't deserve this." "Thank you, Marie," I replied, changing the subject to something more pleasant. We talked and laughed for another hour, exchanged numbers, and agreed to meet again. As they left, Jenny smiled and gave me 2 thumbs up. The next weekend, I asked Marie out for dinner and dancing. She enthusiastically agreed. "I'd love that," she said. After our 3rd date, I invited them to my house and cooked dinner. "I learned to cook after my divorce," I said, serving lasagna. They seemed to like it. "Your house is nice," Marie said, but I overheard her telling Jenny it needed a feminine touch. I wouldn't have argued. The following weekend, I visited them. Marie's cooking put mine to shame. Even Kayla wasn't as good, I admitted, apologizing for eating so much. They laughed. "That's the best compliment you can give a cook," Marie said. Jenny was also a good cook. 2 weekends later, I took Marie to dinner and a dance club. During a slow song, we pressed together, swaying to the music, and ended up kissing. It was pretty hot. A few weeks later, she leaned over and whispered, "Take me home." Surprised, I said, "I thought we were having a great time. Now you want to go home?" She giggled. "No, silly, take me to your house." Relieved, I agreed. Luckily, I had my regular truck and not the '72, which might not have handled the drive. I went for it. The next morning, I made her breakfast before driving her home. I got another double thumbs up from the red-headed teenager in the window. I proposed, and she said yes. We had a simple ceremony in front of a judge, and they moved into my house. Jenny even started calling me Daddy. Life was wonderful despite occasional disagreements. Jenny and I had our differences too. She was a teenager, and I was the authority figure. Still, she respected me, and her mom loved me as much as I loved her. About a year later, I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. "Hello?" "Hi, Daddy," an excited voice said. "Carly?" I asked. "Yes, Daddy, it's me. I have great news," she said. "Really? It's great to hear from you." "I'm getting married," she announced. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm so happy for you." "I want you at my wedding," she said. "Of course. It's a great honor to walk my daughter down the aisle. I also have a wedding fund for you." "Oh no, Clarence is paying for the wedding, and he'll be walking me down the aisle. Since it would be awkward for you and Mom, you won't be in the front pew, but I still want you there." "Clarence? The man your mother cheated on me with? Did she marry him?" "Dad, I'm trying to rebuild our relationship. After you left, she and Clarence fell in love and got married. It's your fault. If you hadn't left, they wouldn't have continued dating. Clearly, you still think your mother did nothing wrong. I can't support a marriage I believe will fail. You might cheat on your husband like your mother did, and you took my last honor and gave it to the man who broke up our family. You're showing how selfish you've become. Fine, don't expect to see your grandchildren if you act like this. I don't want anything to do with them." "Really, Dad? Mom's right, you really are a fool." Click. That was the last thing I heard from my daughter as I hung up. So much for a relationship with her or Josh. It hurt that they still blamed me for their mother's actions. I put my phone away and went to work on the 1963 Chevy pickup I had pulled from a field. I wanted it to be more drivable than my 72, with a rebuilt 350 engine slightly more powerful than the original. I didn't notice Jenny grabbed my phone. I didn't even know she was home. I saw my phone ringing from an unknown number, one of many calls during wedding planning. Hello? Hi, is this Carly Williams? Yes, what can I do for you? You can stop calling my dad and being a cow to him. He's the best man I know, and he doesn't deserve a spoiled strumpet like you reminding him of the past. You and your family are a waste of air. Who are you? I'm Jenny Williams, your sister. My mom married your ex-dad and he adopted me. I love him and respect him. Unlike you. Your mom disrespected her husband and slept with another guy, and you don't seem to care. My biological father cheated on my mom and she kicked him out. If my mom had cheated on my dad, I'd help him throw her out. Your dad is decent and compassionate. I'm thinking of sending your mom a thank you card for letting him go. Oh, and you can tell your grandparents they have another granddaughter, but I don't want anything to do with people who rejected their own son for a cheating strumpet and her traitorous offspring. When you say your vows, think about your husband cheating on you and call me so I can laugh. Have a crappy life, sis. Click. I stared at my phone in shock. First, I learned my father got married without telling us. Then I found out I had a younger sister. I couldn't shake the thought that she looked a lot like me. Before Mom told Josh and me that Dad was leaving over something small, at first, I thought Dad must have had a good reason and considered living with him. But then Mom explained she just needed a small thing to restore her strength. It was just one short period compared to their long time together. Mom was willing to work things out, but Dad wouldn't even try. He was the one leaving and breaking us apart. I couldn't believe how rude Jenny was to me. She didn't give me a chance to explain that Dad abandoned us and Mom was trying to move on. It was a one-time event, insignificant in their long relationship, and yet she called me vile names without knowing me. Why was Dad so upset? Of course. Clarence was walking me down the aisle. He'd been there for me for years. I hadn't talked to Dad since Josh and I told him how angry we were about him leaving. Besides, Clarence was paying almost $20,000 for my wedding. I couldn't imagine how little Dad had set aside. Half an hour later, when my mom and grandmothers came back from shopping, I was still upset about those calls. Honey, what's wrong? Mom asked. I told Dad about the wedding and invited him. I thought he'd want to be there, and maybe we could rebuild our relationship. Oh, that's wonderful, exclaimed Grandma Williams. Is he coming? We haven't heard from him since he called about Thanksgiving years ago. I sighed. No, he got mad when I said Clarence would walk me down the aisle and that it would be awkward for him to sit with Mom and Clarence. That's too bad. I thought he'd gotten over his pig-headedness by now, Grandma said. Well, it gets worse. I found out I have a half-sister, I added. What? They all said in unison. Yes, a girl named Jenny Williams called after Dad hung up. Apparently, he married her mom and adopted her. She wasn't nice on the phone. The nicest thing she said was thanking my mom for being stupid, or she wouldn't have such a great dad. I recounted both phone calls to them. They were shocked by the anger from Dad and Jenny. Tom got married and we weren't invited. He didn't even tell us, Grandma whispered. I have another granddaughter? My wedding day finally arrived. I thought briefly about my father and felt sad he wouldn't be there, but it was my happy day. I was marrying the man I loved. Clarence took my hand and we walked down the aisle to the wedding march. I was beyond happy, surrounded by friends and family. Josh was one of Bobby's groomsmen. Tears of joy filled my eyes. Bobby smiled at me from the altar, and Mom looked at me with pride. Clarence lifted my veil, kissed my cheek, and said, "Congratulations, baby girl." He handed me to Bobby. When the priest asked, "Who gives this bride away?" Clarence replied, "Her mother and I." It felt off, but I couldn't figure out why. As the ceremony began, I repeated my vows, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. I couldn't continue. I remembered Jenny's words and imagined Bobby with another woman, then him as a broken man if I cheated. I understand now, I said. Bobby looked concerned. I felt a weight lift off me and smiled. I finally get it, I told Bobby. That's great, Carly, but what did you realize? Everything, I replied, then got serious. Bobby, do you really love me? Of course I love you. How can you ask that? I have to ask because I can't marry you today. The audience gasped. We'll still get married, just not today. This is wrong, and I have to make it right. I only want to get married once for life. Babe, what's wrong? Bobby, I love you. I will marry you, but I need to explain and make things right first. We'll reschedule and plan our wedding again. You're not leaving me at the altar, are you? No. You should come with me. Everyone, I'm sorry, but we can't do this today. We're not canceling, just postponing. We'll let you know the new date. If you don't want to come, we understand. But think of the story you'll tell. The reception hall is ready. Everything's paid for. So enjoy the food, drinks, and dancing. Clarence will cover the bill. I took Bobby's hand and headed back down the aisle. Mom and Clarence blocked my exit. Clarence yelled about the money he'd spent and demanded I repay him. Mom asked, "Carly, what are you doing?" "I'm correcting a mistake I made years ago." "What mistake?" "Listening to you instead of supporting Dad." "The mistake of blaming him for the breakup when it was your fault for cheating." "Carly, I'm your mother. Speak to me with respect." "Respect? Once a cheater, always a cheater." "Carly, how dare you? How dare I?" "I realized today what a horrible person you are. I saw how much it would hurt if Bobby cheated on me, just like you hurt Dad. I guess Dad was a good role model after all, but you weren't." "What do you mean?" she asked, fear in her eyes. "Do you think I don't know about your workouts with Jim Davis at his apartment or your sessions with Carlos, the pool guy? How about the landscaping crew? I've got video footage of your affairs and tipping Mario, your barber, with a blowjob. At least Clarence doesn't have to worry about you cheating with your boss, since he is your boss. And don't forget Alan Morris, your neighbor." Mom's eyes flicked to Clarence, who looked utterly shocked. I continued, "Clarence, I swear I'll repay the money you spent on this wedding with the same commitment my mother has to her vows." Then I pulled Bobby down the aisle and stopped to talk to the videographer. He had captured everything and handed me a copy of the video. I signed an authorization form to post it on YouTube, hoping it would go viral. Bobby and I ran to the parking lot. He had driven his car with our bags in the trunk. We planned to move them to the limo, but now we just got in his car. I knew Dad would like Bobby, especially when the 440-cylinder engine of his 1969 Challenger roared to life. It wasn't a GM, but it was still a beast. "Where are we going?" he asked as we sped out of the parking lot. "Head west on 156. "I'll put the address in Waze," I replied, working my phone. It wasn't hard to find. I knew the town he lived in, and a quick search of real estate records gave me the address. He was about 2 hours away. I hoped he'd be home when we arrived. We didn't stop to change clothes. I was on a mission and didn't want to waste time. It's unusual to open your door to a woman in a wedding dress and a man in a tuxedo. If you were a priest at a church, it might happen occasionally, but I'm not a priest, nor do I live in a church. The bigger surprise was recognizing my daughter, who had made it clear she didn't want to see me. Today was her wedding day, so why was she here instead of at the church, reception, or on her honeymoon? "Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute, please?" she asked softly. Still stunned, I stepped back and let them in, gesturing toward the living room where Marie and Jenny were. They looked shocked. "Oh, Carly, this is my wife, Marie, and our daughter, Jenny. Jenny, Marie, this is Carly." "I'm sorry, but I don't know who the guy with her is." "Oh, Dad, this is Bobby Jensen," Carly introduced. "Bobby, this is my dad, Tom Williams, his wife, Marie, and my sister, Jenny." "Fiancé? I thought you just got married a couple of hours ago," I said, confused. "That's what I need to talk to you about. I can't do it today. I can't get married unless Daddy walks me down the aisle." "Daddy, I finally understand. You were right. I'm sorry for blaming you. It was Mom who gave up on us, not you. I'm sorry for everything I said and did. You didn't deserve any of it. I was young and stupid and listened to the wrong people. Please forgive me and let me back into your life. I really want to marry Bobby, but I need you to walk me down the aisle." I should have been focusing on other things, but I couldn't ignore the scene unfolding. I was glad Carly realized I wasn't the bad guy and wanted me back in her life, but I had to know more. "So, Carly, did something happen at the wedding? You're wearing a wedding dress, and Bobby's in a tux. Were you really at the wedding?" She looked at herself, then at Bobby. "Yes. We were halfway through the ceremony when I had an epiphany. Here," she said, handing me a disc. "Maybe you should watch it while Bobby and I change." Bobby grabbed their suitcase from the car, and Marie took Carly to a bedroom to change. Meanwhile, I set up a video player connected to the big screen. When Carly and Bobby were ready, Marie joined me, and I pressed play. It started like a normal wedding ceremony. The groomsmen escorted the bridesmaids down the aisle, then separated at the altar. Bobby entered with the priest, then the ring bearer and flower girl. Finally, Clarence walked Carly down the aisle. Everything was typical until Carly started saying her vows. She suddenly found it hard to speak and got stuck on one word. She did it. "I can't believe it hit her so hard," whispered Jenny to herself. I was about to ask Jenny what she meant when Carly stopped her vows and changed everything. The video showed her stopping the wedding and confronting her mom, revealing her increased cheating since marrying Clarence. By the time the video ended, Carly and Bobby had changed clothes and returned to the living room. I couldn't go through with it. Looking into Bobby's eyes, I realized how much it would hurt him if I did to him what Mom did to you. I finally understood what forsaking all others meant and saw how Mom had broken that vow. She dishonored you, and I dishonored you by not giving you the place of honor you deserve. I realized that if I wanted my vows to have meaning, I needed you to walk me down the aisle, not Mom and Clarence. Carly smiled and looked at Jenny. I need my little sister as a bridesmaid. Your words woke me up. How can I get married without you by my side? We talked for hours. Jenny had gotten Carly's number from my phone and called her right after I went to the workshop. As it got late, I asked Carly and Bobby to stay in the guest bedroom. Throughout the evening, Carly received several calls. She ignored Clarence and Kayla but talked to friends who were enjoying the reception. Clarence couldn't cancel the reception, so he showed up to find people taking advantage of the open bar and food. Josh sent Carly a video of Clarence and Kayla arguing, with Clarence yelling, "cheating, strumpet" frequently. Their relationship seemed to be ending too. Josh canceled his reservations but paid a penalty. Carly and Bobby stayed with us all week since they had already taken time off for their honeymoon. I reconnected with Carly and got to know Bobby better. Though he initially believed the lies told by my ex-wife and kids, he warmed up to me after learning the truth. Showing him my shop and projects helped, as we both appreciated each other's cars. By midweek, a new wedding date was set for the same venue a year later. This time, I would walk Carly down the aisle and pay for the wedding, with Marie and Jenny helping out. Carly and Bobby updated the wedding party, excluding Kayla and Clarence. Over the next few months, Carly and I rebuilt our relationship. Bobby and I bonded over car shows, and Jenny joined in with her '74 Firebird. Carly and Bobby visited us regularly, and even Josh came by a few times. Though it was harder with Josh due to his closeness to his mother, we rebuilt some of our relationship, partly for Carly's sake. He also brought news from home. By the way, things between Kayla and Clarence fell apart. Clarence moved out and filed for divorce due to irreconcilable differences, not infidelity. So the harsh penalties of their prenup didn't apply. He aimed for a quick and easy split. Fortunately for Clarence, the prenup stated that all his premarital property was exempt from division. Kayla would get half of the property acquired during the marriage, which wasn't much, mainly the house and about $50,000. Clarence tried to claim part of the house but had no proof. Although he used his money to buy out my share after the divorce, he couldn't prove it. He took a business loan for his company to get the money but didn't document the expenses. Since Kayla owned the house before they married and never put Clarence's name on the title, she refused to discuss it. Clarence ended up paying off the loan without getting any return. By the time he realized this, it was too late to file an infidelity complaint. Rumors of Kayla's infidelity spread, damaging her reputation. Friends distanced themselves, and invitations dried up. Her financial situation worsened without Clarence's support. Clarence learned an expensive lesson. He lost hundreds of thousands buying out my half of the house, another $28,000 on the wedding, and had to pay Kayla $50,000 in the divorce. He also faced humiliation. Kayla told everyone he had a small member and didn't know how to use it. She spread gossip that he refused to perform oral sex on her. This destroyed his social life, turning him into a recluse. "Ready, Daddy?" my oldest daughter asked. "No father is ever ready to let his daughters go, but I'm honored to do it for you," I replied. The doors opened, music filled the church, and I proudly walked my daughter down the aisle. I glanced at the fourth row, where my ex-wife sat, and then at the front row, where my wife Marie sat. After giving my daughter away, I whispered, "Love you, baby," kissed her on the cheek, and handed her to Bobby. I joined Marie in the front row. Carly practically shouted, "To have and to hold in sickness and in health, in good times and bad." With a bright smile, she finished her vows. The ceremony was beautiful, and the applause was loud when they kissed. At the reception, I noticed Kayla sitting off to the side, unhappy and drinking from the open bar. Clarence wasn't invited. My duties were done. I walked my daughter down the aisle, gave a toast, danced the father-daughter dance, and then danced with my wife. I sat next to Marie and watched my youngest daughter dance with one of the many guys vying for her attention. "May I ask your husband for this dance?" I heard a familiar voice ask. My wife, Marie, and I turned to face my ex-wife. Marie stared for a moment before responding, "Just return him to where you found him." She looked at me. "I trust you, but not her." I led Kayla to the floor as a slow song started playing. I kept my distance and tried not to pull her close. After a bit, she spoke. "You were supposed to give me that one night. We were supposed to forget about it and move on. Tonight should have been just us. You shouldn't have left that night." You should have known I wouldn't accept you cheating on me no matter how many times you did it. I didn't cheat. I told you before I did it. I didn't sneak around. Whether you told me or not is irrelevant. The fact is, you had sex with someone else. Besides, I told you not to do it, but you did it anyway. I never wanted this. I just wanted one night, and then we could be together forever. You know you're the only man I've ever loved. I never loved him. The sex wasn't even that great. Then why did you marry him? Because you divorced me. I didn't love him, but I didn't want to be alone. I thought I could love him, but I couldn't get over you. I did those nasty things because I was angry you left. I still loved you, but you wouldn't talk to me. After that night, I realized you were all I needed. So why did you cheat on him? Because he was terrible in bed. He wouldn't take advice, wouldn't go down on me, and I stopped giving him blowjobs. When I couldn't take it anymore, I found other guys who could satisfy me. I didn't know Carly knew. I never thought she'd leave me like that. I feel sorry for you. We had a great marriage, but you ruined it for one night of mediocre sex. I don't think there's any chance. I laughed. Even if I wasn't married now, you destroyed any possibility of us getting back together by turning our kids against me. I'm happily married now, with another daughter I love. The best I can offer is being civil at events with our children and grandchildren. Thankfully, the song ended. I didn't speak to her again that evening. She couldn't afford the mortgage, so she sold the house and moved into a small apartment. The sale proceeds were enough for her to live on if she was careful. She dated occasionally but never had another serious relationship. Clarence ended up living alone too. Carly and Bobby had a long, loving marriage with 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. Josh married a nice girl, and they had 2 daughters. As far as I know, neither cheated on their spouse. Some people think I should have sought revenge on Kayla and Clarence, but I chose to move forward and live my life well. The best revenge is a life well lived, and I let karma handle the rest. Clarence and Kayla didn't burn, but they didn't escape unscathed. I had nothing to do with their downfall, but I still feel good. I have my wife, daughter, and 2 other children back in my life. I'm surrounded by people who love me and have a good life. Ready, Daddy? My daughter asked. No father is ever ready to let his daughter go, but I'm honored to do it for you, I replied. The doors opened, music filled the church, and I proudly led my daughter down the aisle. My wife smiled from her place of honor in the front row. I joined her after fulfilling this last important duty for my daughter. Don't worry, Dad. I'm going to do it right, Jenny assured me. Our son abandoned us to marry a woman and never returned, not even when my wife was fighting cancer. Now that she's gone, he has returned, but with a different agenda. I'm an old man, 72 years old to be exact. My wife, Elizabeth, passed away last week after battling cancer for 2 years. We were married for 48 years and loved each other deeply. Elizabeth was my rock, my best friend, and the love of my life. We had a good life together, living in the same big house we bought when we were newlyweds. It was always filled with laughter and love, especially when our son Tom was growing up. Tom was our only child, and we doted on him. We sent him to the best schools and supported all his dreams and ambitions. He was a good kid, always respectful and hardworking. When he went off to college, we were so proud. We thought he'd come back home after graduating, maybe find a job in the city and settle down nearby. But life had other plans. During his senior year, Tom met a girl named Anna. They fell in love quickly and got married right after graduation. We were happy for them, but we were also worried. They were so young, and Tom had just started his career. We offered to let them live with us until they got on their feet, but they declined. They wanted to make it on their own. At first, Tom called regularly. He'd tell us about his new job, their apartment, and their life together. But as time went on, the calls became less frequent. Weeks turned into months, and before we knew it, a whole year had passed without hearing from him. We tried calling, but he never picked up. We sent letters, but they went unanswered. It was like he had disappeared from our lives completely. Elizabeth and I were heartbroken. We couldn't understand why our son had cut us off. We wondered if we had done something wrong, if we had been bad parents somehow. The house felt emptier than ever. We missed the sound of Tom's laughter, the way he'd bound down the stairs in the morning, even the mess he'd leave in the kitchen after making a midnight snack. As the years went by, we learned to live with the silence. We focused on each other, on our hobbies, and on our friends. We traveled a bit, saw some of the places we'd always dreamed of visiting. But there was always a Tom-shaped hole in our hearts. Every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone, we'd think of him and wonder how he was doing. When Elizabeth got sick, I hoped Tom would somehow find out and come home. I imagined him rushing through the door, full of apologies and worry. But he never came. I took care of Elizabeth myself, with help from our neighbors and friends. It was hard watching the vibrant woman I loved fade away, but we faced it together, just like we had faced everything else in our lives. After Elizabeth passed, I was lost. The house felt empty without her in it. I wandered from room to room, touching her things, remembering our life together, planning her. Funeral was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I wanted it to be perfect, a fitting tribute to the amazing woman she was. The day of the funeral arrived. I stood at the front of the church, greeting people as they came in. And then I saw him, Tom. He was older, of course, with touches of gray at his temples. Beside him was a woman I assumed was Anna, and 2 children, a boy and a girl. I froze, not knowing what to do or say. Tom approached me hesitantly. He looked nervous, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. We stared at each other for a moment, and then he hugged me. It was awkward at first, but then I felt myself relax into it. It felt like coming home. We didn't have time to talk much before the service started. Tom and his family sat in the front row with me. Throughout the service, I could hear him sniffling beside me. When it was time for people to share memories of Elizabeth, Tom stood up, his voice shaking. He talked about how patient and kind Elizabeth had been, how she always made his favorite cookies when he was sad, how she taught him to ride a bike and bandaged his scraped knees. By the end, we were all in tears. After the funeral, as people were leaving, Tom asked if we could talk. We went to a quiet corner of the church. He broke down then, apologizing over and over for not being there, for cutting us off, for missing out on so much time. He said he had been young and stupid, caught up in proving he could make it on his own. He said Anna had encouraged him to reach out many times, but he had been too ashamed. I listened to him, my heart breaking all over again. But I also felt a weight lifting. My son was back. He hadn't forgotten us, hadn't stopped loving us. He had just lost his way for a while. I forgave him. How could I not? He was my son, and I loved him. We hugged again, and this time it felt right, natural, like no time had passed at all. Tom introduced me properly to Anna and the kids, my grandchildren. I couldn't believe it. The boy, Michael, was 8, and the girl, Emily, was 6. They were beautiful, and they called me Grandpa right away. It was surreal. We all went back to the house after the funeral. As the kids explored the big old place, running up and down the stairs and exclaiming over everything, Tom and I sat in the living room. We talked for hours, catching up on all the lost years. He told me about his job, his life, his struggles, and triumphs. I told him about Elizabeth's illness, about our travels, about how we'd missed him. As the evening wore on, I finally asked Tom what his plans were. He hesitated, then told me he had a good job in another state where he and his family had settled. They had a nice house, the kids were in good schools, and Anna had a career she loved. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was worried about me, about leaving me alone in this big house. But I knew what I had to do. I told him it was okay that he should go back to his life. I said I was just happy to have him back in my life, and that we could visit each other. Tom protested at first. He suggested I sell the house and move closer to them, but I couldn't do that. This house was full of memories of Elizabeth, of our life together. It was my home. In the end, Tom agreed to go back. We made plans for regular visits and phone calls. As they were leaving, Tom hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I love you." After they left, I sat in Elizabeth's favorite chair and cried. I cried for all the lost years, for Elizabeth, who didn't get to see this reconciliation, for the grandchildren we never knew we had. But I also cried from happiness. My family was whole again. Now, a week later, I'm wondering if I did the right thing. Should I have asked Tom to move back? Am I being selfish by staying in this house? But then I think of Tom's life, his career, his children's schools. I think of the life he's built for himself, and I know I made the right choice. Update: it's been 3 months since my last post, and a lot has changed. First, I want to thank everyone for their kind words and support. Your responses helped me feel more confident in my decision not to ask Tom to move back home. After the funeral, Tom kept his promise to stay in touch. He called me every week, sometimes more often. We talked about everything: his work, the kids, my daily life. It felt good to reconnect with my son after so many years apart. About a month after the funeral, Tom surprised me by showing up for a weekend visit with his family. I was overjoyed to see them. We spent the weekend looking through old photo albums, telling stories about Elizabeth, and playing with the grandkids in the backyard. It felt like we were making up for lost time. To my surprise, these visits became a regular occurrence. Every other weekend, Tom and his family would drive down to spend time with me. Sometimes they'd stay overnight, other times just for the day. Each visit filled the house with laughter and life again. I started to look forward to these weekends, planning activities and cooking big meals for everyone. Tom seemed genuinely interested in my life. He asked about my friends, my hobbies, and how I was coping with Elizabeth's loss. He even helped me with some home repairs I'd been putting off. I felt touched by his attention and care. It seemed like he was really trying to make amends for the years he'd been absent. However, about 2 months into these regular visits, I started noticing something odd. Tom began asking more questions about financial matters. At first, it was casual. He'd ask how I was managing with just my pension, or if I'd considered downsizing to a smaller home. I didn't think much of it initially. I assumed he was just concerned about my well-being. But then the questions became more frequent and more specific. He asked about my savings, my investments, and even about Elizabeth's life insurance policy. He wanted to know if I had updated my will recently. These conversations made me uncomfortable, but I tried to brush it off. I told myself that Tom was just trying to make sure I was taken care of in my old age. Things came to a head last week when my sister Linda came to visit. After Tom and his family left on Sunday evening, Linda sat me down for a serious talk. She told me that several of our relatives and close friends had noticed Tom's behavior and were concerned. Apparently, Tom had been asking them questions about my financial situation as well. Linda mentioned that Tom had asked her about the value of the house and whether she knew anything about my pension program. He had even inquired about any potential inheritances from other family members. She was worried that Tom might be more interested in my money than in rebuilding our relationship. I was shocked and hurt by this revelation. I didn't want to believe it, but as I thought back over the past few months, I realized that Tom's questions had indeed become increasingly focused on financial matters. The realization made me angry and confused. Was this why he had suddenly reappeared in my life? Was he just after my money? I spent the next few days thinking over the situation. I thought about all the good moments we'd shared over the past few months, the laughter, the shared memories, the way Tom had helped around the house. It was hard to reconcile those experiences with the idea that he might have ulterior motives. Part of me wanted to confront Tom immediately, to demand an explanation for his behavior. But another part of me was afraid. What if it was true? What if I lost my son again just when I thought I had him back? I decided to take a step back and observe. I didn't want to jump to conclusions based on hearsay, even if it came from people I trusted. I resolved to pay closer attention to Tom's behavior during his next visit, to see if I could discern his true intentions. Now I find myself in a difficult position. I'm grateful for the time I've been able to spend with my son and grandchildren. These past few months have brought me joy I hadn't felt in years, but I can't ignore the nagging doubts that have crept in. I'm torn between my love for my son and my need to protect myself. I don't want to believe that Tom is only interested in my money, but I can't dismiss the concerns of my sister and friends. I'm worried that confronting Tom might drive him away again, but I'm equally worried about being taken advantage of. So now I'm turning to you, Reddit. What should I do? How can I find out Tom's true intentions without jeopardizing our newly rebuilt relationship? Am I overreacting to these concerns, or should I be more cautious? Any advice would be appreciated as I navigate this complicated situation. Update: it's been a month since my last update, and I've made a difficult discovery about my son's true intentions. After much thought and consideration of the advice I received, I decided to test Tom to see if his renewed interest in my life was genuine or motivated by financial gain. I came up with a plan that I hoped would reveal Tom's true colors. I decided to tell him that I was ready to sell the house and move closer to him and his family. I thought this would give me a chance to observe his reaction and see how he'd handle the prospect of me actually becoming a more permanent part of his life. When Tom and his family arrived for their next weekend visit, I waited until after dinner to bring up the subject. The kids were playing in the living room and Tom, Anna, and I were sitting around the kitchen table. I took a deep breath and told them I'd been thinking a lot about my future. I said that living alone in this big house was becoming too much for me to handle. I told them I missed having family around and that I had decided to sell the house and move closer to them. I watched their faces carefully as I spoke. Tom's reaction was not what I had hoped for. Instead of looking happy or excited at the prospect of having me nearby, he seemed taken aback. He exchanged a quick glance with Anna before asking me if I was sure about this decision. His voice sounded more concerned than pleased. Then Tom asked the question I had been dreading: how much did I think the house would sell for? I told him the estimated value, which was quite substantial given the size of the house and its location. As soon as I mentioned the figure, I saw a spark of interest in both Tom and Anna's eyes. They quickly recovered and started talking about how great it would be to have me closer. They discussed potential neighborhoods where I could live and even offered to help with the move. But I couldn't shake the feeling that their enthusiasm was more about the money than about me. As the evening went on, Tom and Anna became more animated. They talked about all the things we could do together once I moved. They even suggested I could babysit the kids more often. On the surface, everything seemed positive, but something felt off. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, trying to make sense of Tom's reactions. As I was about to go back to my room after getting a glass of water, I heard hushed voices coming from the guest room where Tom and Anna were staying. I know it wasn't right, but I couldn't help myself. I stood near the door and listened. What I heard broke my heart. Tom and Anna were discussing the prospect of selling the house. Tom said that with that kind of money, they could pay off all their loans and still have plenty left over. He talked about renovating their home, buying a new car, and taking luxury vacations. Anna sounded excited too, but then she asked about where I would live. Tom's response chilled me to the bone. He said he would convince me to move into a retirement home or assisted living facility. He argued that it would be better for everyone. I'd have round-the-clock care, and they wouldn't have to worry about me. Anna seemed hesitant, but Tom insisted he could persuade me. As I stood there listening, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me: anger, hurt, disappointment, and a deep, aching sadness. This was my son, the little boy I had raised and loved, now plotting to take my home and put me in a facility just to get his hands on my money. I couldn't bear to listen anymore. Without thinking, I pushed open the door. Tom and Anna jumped, startled by my sudden appearance. The look on their faces when they realized I had overheard their conversation was a mixture of shock and guilt. For a moment, we all just stared at each other in silence. Then the dam broke. All the hurt and anger I had been holding back came pouring out. I accused Tom of being greedy and selfish. I reminded him that he hadn't even bothered to come see his mother when she was dying, and now he was back just because he needed money. I told him I knew about all the questions he'd been asking our relatives and friends about my finances. I said I had hoped he had truly wanted to reconnect, to be a family again, but now I saw that it was all about the money. Tom tried to defend himself. He said I had misunderstood, that he was just trying to plan for the future. He claimed he was worried about my well-being and wanted to make sure I was taken care of, but his excuses rang hollow in light of what I had just overheard. Anna sat silently, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to defend Tom or offer any explanations of her own. Her silence spoke volumes. I told them both that I wanted them to leave immediately. It was the middle of the night, but I couldn't bear to have them in my house for another minute. Tom protested, saying they couldn't just pack up and go with the kids asleep, but I was adamant. As they hurriedly packed their things and woke the children, I sat in the living room, feeling numb. The grandchildren, groggy and confused, asked what was happening. I couldn't bring myself to explain. I just hugged them and said goodbye, wondering if I would ever see them again. Before they left, Tom tried one last time to explain, to apologize, but I couldn't hear it. The trust was broken, and I couldn't see how it could ever be repaired. I told him not to come back, not to call, not to contact me in any way. Then I watched as they drove away into the night. The house felt emptier than ever after they left. I spent the rest of the night sitting in Elizabeth's favorite chair, wondering how things had gone so wrong. I thought about all the happy memories we had made in this house, Elizabeth and me, and then with Tom as he grew up. It seemed impossible that it had come to this. In the days that followed, I went through a range of emotions. There was anger at Tom for his deception and at myself for being so easily fooled. There was sadness at losing my son and grandchildren all over again. But mostly there was a deep, aching loneliness. I considered calling Tom, trying to work things out, but every time I picked up the phone, I remembered what I had overheard and put it back down. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Instead, I focused on moving forward with my life. I called my sister and a few close friends, explaining what had happened. Their support and understanding helped me through the darkest days. I started volunteering at a local community center, which gave me a sense of purpose and connection. I also made the decision to stay in my house. This was the home Elizabeth and I had built together, filled with a lifetime of memories. I wouldn't let Tom's actions taint that. I hired a part-time housekeeper to help with the upkeep, which made managing the place much easier. As the weeks passed, the pain began to lessen. I still had moments of sadness, especially when I thought about my grandchildren, but I also found myself appreciating the peace and independence of my life. I started to rediscover old hobbies and even made some new friends at the community center. Looking back, I realized that while the experience was painful, it taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and the importance of being cautious, even with family. I'm sad that things turned out this way with Tom, but I'm also proud of myself for standing up for what's right. Now, as I sit in our old house, surrounded by memories of Elizabeth, I feel a sense of contentment. Life may not have turned out the way I expected, but I'm determined to make the most of the years I have left, and I'll do it on my own terms. with the knowledge that I stayed true to myself and to Elizabeth's memory.
It's like my parents only care about my sister. It's always my sister this and my sister that. But then they decided to miss one of the biggest days of my life. Let me tell you what I did that day. Sometimes I can't help but wonder why my parents adopted me, And why did I end up with parents like them? I never really felt welcome at home because my sister never wanted me around. Mom and Dad were always trying to please her, doing whatever she said. It's pretty clear where this is going, right? When I was 3, I was in a car accident with my biological parents, and sadly, they both passed away on the spot. I ended up in the hospital for almost a year. The nurses told me I was in a coma for 3 months, and then I had severe seizures for 8 months because of the accident. It was tough, and I didn't think I'd ever get over it. I blamed myself for what happened to my parents during that time. After I got out of the hospital, a psychologist helped me mentally recover. But I had nowhere else to go since I didn't know anyone other than my parents. They took me to an orphanage out of town, saying it would be better for me to have some peace and quiet. Avoiding cars would definitely speed up my recovery. 2 years later, I got adopted by my new parents, who happened to be Amba's parents. They were informed about my past and asked if my screaming at night and random breakdowns would be a problem for them. But they were determined to give me the best life and make up for the tough times of the last 2 to 3 years. Finally, we went home. Honestly, I wasn't really ready for a new family because I was still mourning my parents' death. But their love and affection helped me cope with the feeling of being alone in the world. The first 2 years with my new family are the best memories I have. I felt safe at home, but my sister started distancing herself from me and complaining about petty things I did. I thought it was just typical sibling behavior, acting like they hate you but actually adoring you. But in my case, it was different. Amber felt like I had taken everything from her and was jealous of the attention I got. I needed that attention, though, because I was not okay at all. My mental health required someone strong by my side to help me overcome all that I had been through. But she couldn't understand because she hadn't been through what I experienced, and she was just a kid. Things changed when I started middle school. My parents started acting differently, not giving me the same attention as before. I thought it was because I was growing up and learning to be more independent, but it seemed like my sister was emotionally manipulating them. She wasn't doing well in school, and they started giving me more attention instead. Since they were worried about me getting injured, they didn't let me play soccer and only allowed some racket sports in secondary school. I had a crush on this girl who happened to be Amba's best friend. Little did I know that my feelings for her would create a bigger rift between me and my sister. She felt like I came into her life and took away everyone who mattered to her. She stopped making friends after my girlfriend and I started dating. After a few months, I broke up with my girlfriend because my PTSD was resurfacing, and I was becoming violent. I started attending AA meetings, and my parents got me a therapist, but they weren't really there for me. Every time I went to see the therapist, my sister would come up with some excuse to make them miss my appointments. But I slowly started feeling better, and this was about 3 months before my high school graduation. On the big day, I dressed up in a fancy suit my parents got for me. While waiting for my parents to drive me to school, I heard a noise from upstairs to downstairs. I turned and saw Amber lying on the floor with blood on her forehead. I freaked out and called for Mom and Dad to come down quickly. They rushed down, worried about Amber. Thankfully, she didn't pass out. When asked what happened, Amber said that Jonathan pushed her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did they just fail me? She accused me of pushing her down the stairs on my special day. Why on earth would I do that? Mom and Dad took Amber to the hospital and left me with money for a cab or Uber to go to school alone. I thought about running away, but that wouldn't solve anything and would only worry my parents. So I ended up attending my graduation alone without Mom. On that day without Dad, I missed my biological parents more than ever. I wish they could be there with me as I was about to graduate and move on to college. After graduation, I got invited to my friend's party. But I couldn't go because I knew my parents were expecting me home after what happened to my sister earlier. When I got home, I found my mom and dad in the living room. I sat down facing them, and they started talking to me. They understood that I've been through a lot and might still be dealing with mental distress, but they scolded me for something I didn't even do. What happened to my sister? It felt so unfair to be blamed for it. Losing my parents was already cruel, and now I was being forced to admit to something false. Since that day, Amber and I grew apart. I wanted to stay away from her as much as possible because she seemed determined to turn my parents against me and make them regret adopting me. I applied for college, and when I told my parents, they seemed proud. But later they said they couldn't afford to pay for my tuition. It was like they were changing from caring people into heartless monsters because of my sister's influence. I sent out sponsorship letters to different places, and luckily a local bank offered me financial assistance. In college, I met my future wife and her brother, Shu Yang. Shu Yang became a close friend after I started dating his sister. He was really skilled with computers. Once I went to college, I didn't hear much from him, and I guess it felt like they were glad to have me out of their lives for a bit. My college graduation was coming up in a month, and I wanted my family there. But then, my mom called and said they couldn't make it because my sister got robbed and she was too scared to travel or be left alone. My mom said that Amber needed them more than I did. It hurt to hear that. Throughout my life, they've missed important events and appointments because of Amber. Every time I needed them, it was always about Amber. Amber this and Amber that. I know she's their biological child, but they became my parents too when they adopted me. So it felt selfish to say Amber needed them more than I did. I didn't need all of them to come. At least one of them could have stayed with Amber, and the other could have shared my happiness at graduation. But nope, they didn't do that because their precious Amber was apparently more important than some random orphan like me. I decided to let it all go and move on with my life. 9 years after graduation, I proposed to my girlfriend, and she said yes. I went back home for dinner to share the big news about my wedding. Everyone seemed happy for me, except my sister Amber. She had this intense, jealous look, like she wanted to swallow me whole. I couldn't figure out why she was jealous, even though she had our parents all to herself. Maybe she wanted to be like me or something. Who knows? Anyway, she gave me this envious look, then stormed off to her room without saying anything. The rest of us looked at each other, wondering if something was said wrong, but we couldn't remember anything. Wedding preparations started, and Amber refused to be a part of it. She claimed to be too busy with work and said she had to stay at the company while they were gone for the wedding. She told our parents to do whatever they needed to do without her. Honestly, I really wanted my parents to be there for my special day. I was terrified that Amber would emotionally manipulate them into not coming. So I went to her room, had a talk with her, and asked her to let me have our parents for my wedding, because it meant the world to me. She gave me this evil smirk when she looked at me. I tried talking to Mom and Dad about it, but they said I shouldn't worry because my sister doesn't mean to hurt me. So the wedding day finally arrived. I looked for Dad, but he was nowhere to be found in the house. I suspected right away that Amber was up to something, and it didn't surprise me that she was behind my parents not showing up for my wedding. Later, I got a voicemail from Dad saying they couldn't make it because of a car accident involving Amber. I was worried at first, but it turned out to be part of Amber's plan to keep them away. I missed my biological parents even more that day. I wanted them to see how I was being treated by my so-called parents. I had my wedding without my family there. My wife and Shu Yang kept asking where my parents were, but I felt embarrassed to tell my in-laws that my family ditched me on my own wedding day. Despite feeling so disappointed that they chose Amber over me, I didn't let it ruin my day. It was my wedding, and I deserved nothing but happiness. After the wedding, we went off for our honeymoon. I haven't felt that genuinely happy since my parents passed away. My wife just made me so happy, and I finally felt complete. I realized she was the missing piece in my life, and she didn't mind when I woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night. Instead, she comforted me and reassured me that she was right there with me. I couldn't feel safer. I used to think I needed a therapist, but all I really needed was her, just her. During our honeymoon, Shu Zhang called and offered to edit our wedding pictures for free. I couldn't say no to such a generous offer, so I gave him the go-ahead. We spent about 3 amazing weeks on our honeymoon, not even thinking about my family back home. My focus was solely on having the best time with my new wife. After the honeymoon, we went back home and got back to work. We started renting a small apartment to save up for a house. Then my brother-in-law came by to show me the edited pictures. I didn't want to agree with him, he's a bit crazy. But I had no idea that his idea of editing the pictures meant adding my parents' pictures to make it look like they were there at the wedding. He was known for being really skilled with computers, but using Photoshop to add my parents to the wedding pictures was just not right. Then he came up with a plan. If I posted those pictures, he said my sister would die. The idea of showing my parents at the wedding and leaving her out made me smile. So I went along with Shujang's plan. I posted the pictures on social media, and they got lots of likes and comments. But the ones I was really waiting for were from Amber, Mom, or Dad. The next day I got a ton of calls and messages from home. They had seen the pictures of the wedding. When I answered the phone, I could feel the anger in my parents' voices. They were furious. They told me to never come back to their house because what I did was unethical and shameless. I couldn't understand why they were so upset about me posting my wedding pictures with them in it. Was it really that bad that they had to curse me out? Mom said that Amber hadn't stopped crying over it. She felt left out and wanted me to take down the videos and pictures right away. But I refused. I told them, "Tell me what you want and I'll give it to you." "Just take down that nonsense you posted," my dad said angrily, making it clear he regretted ever giving me a home. I couldn't help but laugh at him and responded, "Hey, listen, Dad. Don't pat yourself on the back for giving me a home. All you provided was a roof over my head, which I already had at the orphanage. Thanks for the education, but besides that, you made me miss my parents even more every day. You were too focused on your selfish daughter and didn't care about anyone else. And there's nothing that can make up for my parents missing my big wedding." He didn't say anything on the other end of the line. I then added, "By the way, you might want to read your daughter's diary and learn the real truth about her behavior on all my special days. Don't be surprised, like they say. An apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She put me through a lot, and all you did was take her side every time. Do you have any idea how worthless and insignificant that made me feel? I think the only way to make it up to me is by arranging a second wedding that you'll all attend, and we'll take pictures like one big happy family. Then, I'll take down all the other photos and videos." My parents couldn't believe what I just told them. They were actually considering arranging a whole wedding just to please my sister. But then they demanded to see Amba's diary, and were shocked to read about all the misfortunes she had caused on my special days. She may have looked innocent, but she wasn't as innocent as they thought. Turns out she was jealous of me, thinking I took everything that belonged to her, and that jealousy consumed her completely until she lost control. If it wasn't for my brother-in-law, I'd probably still be feeling sorry for myself because of how my family treated me. I think Jonathan's sister's actions are not just vile, they're treacherous for my entire life. It messed up my upbringing and everything, all because she wanted all the attention from our parents, and missing my wedding was the last straw. Guys, let me know what you think of this story. Leave your comments below and let's discuss it. If any of you have had a sibling like this, share your experience with me.
My name is Ron, and my wife Lily and I have been happily married for 15 years. Our family brought me great joy, and I appreciated the love my wife gave me. Over time, our relationship grew, and we had 2 lovely daughters. Both of us had steady, successful jobs. Lily worked as a translator at a film studio, and I worked as a security guard at a company. My love for my wife was immeasurable, and I was confident in her everlasting devotion to me. We were in good health, living in a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. Our life was full of happiness, and it felt perfect. After our second daughter was born, Lily struggled to lose the weight she gained, but her captivating blue eyes remained attractive. She chose not to wear contact lenses because they caused discomfort when reading or working with papers. Instead, she wore glasses with large lenses, which emphasized the attractiveness of her eyes, making them even more seductive. My love for her remained unchanged. I was sure that she really loved me, as our strong bond was quite obvious. Our family was filled with happiness because we had 2 beautiful daughters, and financial stability was never a concern. My life was filled with happiness until that fateful moment. After 15 years of marriage, an unpleasant incident occurred that threatened the harmony and perfection of our world. In recent years, Lily has developed a habit of going to parties with her female colleagues. They visited various pubs, alternating their favorite places. On Fridays, they met in these places after work. Lily often assured me that it was just an opportunity to chat and relax. Naturally, I didn't mind her spending time in such places. After all, I invariably came home in the early morning every day and took responsibility for our daughters. On those evenings when Lily was out with her friends, I cooked dinner for our girls and was happy to help them with their homework. Performing these duties brought me great joy. Lily usually returned home around 8 in the evening after her outings, which allowed us to enjoy the weekend with the whole friendly family. We loved to spend time together, which gave us all great pleasure, and by all means. We had dinner together with our daughters on Saturday evenings, but in recent months, there had been a change. Lily started coming home later than usual on the nights she spent time with her friends. Instead of coming home around 8, she'd come home closer to 10, and I could sense that she'd had a few drinks. Despite my remarks, I didn't voice my concern. After all, she remained the same affectionate and devoted wife she had always been. Every time she returned from an outing, her face lit up with a familiar smile, making me want to hug her tightly. I realized that going out with friends served as a way for Lily to relax, allowing her to escape from the pressures of a stressful work week. I reassured myself that her interactions with the co-workers she spent time with were harmless and purely for pleasure. Even if she started coming home later than usual, I saw no reason to worry. But a few weeks ago, on a Monday morning, I received an email from anonymous sender, who introduced himself as just a friend. At first, I decided to delete the letter without reading it, but after thinking about it, I decided to take the time to familiarize myself with its contents. The letter I received was like this. I happened to be at the Black Crow last Friday evening and noticed your wife among a group of people. She seemed to be enjoying it immensely. I couldn't help but notice that she danced almost exclusively with one particular man from her company. In case you're interested, I decided to capture this moment and took a picture on my mobile phone. Take a good look at the photo, and if you still think there is nothing wrong with her actions, then feel free to ignore this message. There was a file attached to the email that needed to be opened to view the photo. I wondered why someone would send me this message if there was nothing surprising about it. Moreover, the letter had already planted doubts in me, and I felt uneasy about what I was about to find out. It was not pleasant to learn that Lily had danced while walking with a man she had never mentioned before. Up until now, I had always assumed that Lily dated exclusively female colleagues at parties. However, there was a possibility that she was dancing with someone who was already present at the Black Raven, who wasn't really part of their company. Nevertheless, a lump formed in my throat, and an uneasy feeling swept over me. Despite my inner hesitation, I gave in to my curiosity and opened the attachment. When the image appeared on the screen, it was noticeable that it was not quite centered, as if the photographer had taken precautions not to be noticed. In the background, I noticed my wife's colleagues, both men and women, sitting at a long table. Despite the slight blurring of the image, I could still make out my wife on the right, dancing on the dance floor. She was wearing a beige blouse decorated with red flowers and green leaves, and the same brown trousers. It was the same outfit that Lily had worn the last time she went out with her friends. Thus, I came to the conclusion that the photo I am looking at now was taken last Friday. That evening, she came home later than usual. It was 10:30 when she hugged me and looked at me intently. When I looked at the picture, I noticed her happy smile, but something drew my attention. She stood on the dance floor, held closely by a tall young man. They were tightly wrapped around each other, with Lily's arms around his neck. I was quite surprised by what I saw. I couldn't remember ever dancing with Lily in such a bad way, or behaving like that with any other woman in public. The man's lower body pressed against hers, and I couldn't help but imagine the sensations he must have felt due to his obvious attraction. In that position, it seemed natural to feel desire. Strangely, Lily didn't appear alarmed by what was happening. Instead, she wore a pleased smile, suggesting her active involvement when they locked eyes. I felt repulsed witnessing my wife, the mother of our 2 daughters, so close to a stranger and openly displaying affection in public. The disbelief I experienced was beyond words. I knew for certain she would never dance with me in public like that. I couldn't understand why she would allow a complete stranger to act this way with her. A question arose in my mind. Was he truly a stranger? Doubt crept in and grew rapidly, overpowering all my attempts to suppress it. Various scenarios involving my wife and unfamiliar men began to play out in my mind. A strong sense of nausea washed over me, leading me to rush to the bathroom where I regretfully vomited my breakfast. Perplexed, I observed Lily, my beloved wife, behaving in a manner that hinted at promiscuity. Was she really having an affair? How could she betray me and our 2 daughters like this? Countless other questions filled my thoughts, but one kept recurring. Who was this man? I couldn't help but assume he was a colleague of hers. How long had this secret involvement been happening right under my nose? What drove her to engage in such a deceitful relationship with him? Had she betrayed me? I was determined to uncover the truth and gather solid evidence of what had truly occurred. With a renewed sense of purpose, I tried to uncover the latest information about Lily's actions. For the next half hour, I retreated to the bathroom in my room, attempting to regain my composure and mental clarity. As time passed, a whirlwind of emotions stirred within me: disappointment, sadness, anger, fueling a growing desire for revenge. I found myself gripped by intense feelings that provoked a strong reaction. At one point, I wanted to lash out at Lily, vent my anger and frustration. In the next moment, I wanted to embrace her and implore her to end her relationship with this man. Divorce seemed like a viable option, but within a few minutes, I was already considering forgiveness and giving her another chance. Sitting on the toilet, I began to question my sanity as these tumultuous thoughts consumed me. Eventually, I managed to regain control of my emotions. I decided to avoid impulsive actions and patiently monitor Lily's behavior before taking any definitive steps. It was crucial not to let my emotions dictate my decision, as I needed a clear understanding of the situation before making a choice. No, I had to remain patient and refrain from confronting her with what I had discovered. At the same time, I was resolute about uncovering the truth at any cost. I needed concrete evidence to determine if she was being unfaithful or simply indulging in excessive enjoyment. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that she had deceived me by withholding the full truth about her outings with her friends. I noticed that her workplace was just a few blocks from where I worked. Given my frequent business trips, it was relatively convenient for me to keep an eye on Lily. So, the next day, around 11:30 a.m., I discreetly parked my car at the far end of her workplace's parking lot. Thanks to the tinted windows in my company car, I was confident that I remained hidden from prying eyes as I carefully watched the exit door. I patiently waited there until 1 p.m., but she never appeared. I repeated this pattern throughout the week. Finally, on Friday at 12:15 p.m., I spotted Lily with 3 individuals, 2 men and a woman. They all got into a black BMW with Lily sitting in the front seat next to the driver. Without hesitation, I followed them. Our discreet journey took us through busy streets until we arrived at the parking lot of an upscale restaurant. From my spot across the street, directly facing the restaurant, I observed her cheerful laughter as they entered. Remaining in my car, I patiently awaited their departure, which occurred at 2 p.m. Lily walked alongside a tall man with blonde hair, the same man she had danced with in the photo I possessed. There was an air of excitement and camaraderie about them, evident in her playful interactions with him. It was this display that stoked my anger. Together, they returned to her workplace and disappeared inside. Up until this point, Lily hadn't committed any serious wrongdoing, except for not informing me of her actions. She frequently dined with both men and women. But what troubled me most was the seemingly socializing this group displayed during lunch. 2 couples, clearly not friends or colleagues, and that concerned me deeply. What struck me as unusual was that on that Friday, Lily didn't join her female colleagues for their post-work gathering. She returned home at 5:15 p.m., cheerful and wearing her usual smile, displaying remarkable self-control. I refrained from bombarding her with questions, but as we sat in front of the TV after dinner, I couldn't resist inquiring about her day at work and her lunch. For a moment, she appeared confused, but she quickly responded. She claimed to have had a tuna sandwich she had prepared that morning before heading to work. A liar, and possibly even a cheater. Despite my mounting anger, I couldn't ignore the urge to embrace her when she looked at me with her beloved blue eyes. Even as she uttered this blatant lie, conflicting emotions surged within me, torn between resentment and an overwhelming desire to hold her close. Such deep love for a person could elicit such emotions. I knew full well that I had to maintain my composure and self-control so as not to act impulsively and later regret my actions. Instead of pursuing her with questions, I made a conscious choice to change the subject and discuss my own workday. I attempted to behave as I normally did during our weekends together. Lily didn't seem to sense the gravity of the situation. Furthermore, that evening, we exchanged hot words twice, and she behaved as affectionately as ever, like a loving wife. During our vacation, we decided to take our daughters to the zoo to create cherished family memories. For a while, I forgot about the events of the past week, and our day was filled with laughter and joy. Throughout the week, I refrained from monitoring her whereabouts during lunch, as I planned to track her down on Friday evening after work. When my daughters returned home at 3:15 on Friday, I was already there and eagerly awaited their return. I ordered pizza for them, ensuring their happiness, and explained that I had some business at the office. I left them both. My daughters had become quite independent, and I calmly left them alone in the house, provided they locked the doors. I knew they would be sound asleep in their room by the time I got back. Without hesitation, I got into the car and headed to Lily's workplace, arriving there at 5 o'clock. Observing from a distance, I noticed how she drove out of the parking lot, heading in the opposite direction of our house, indicating her intention to meet her friends at the pub for an evening party. It was not difficult to follow her unnoticed, as a line of 6 cars served as a convenient shield for my car. En route, my wife's Toyota seamlessly merged with other cars heading to various venues like a pub, a gathering place, or a dance hall, depending on one's perspective. 10 minutes later, I spotted Lily's Toyota, along with 6 other cars, entering the parking lot adjacent to an establishment known as the Glass Shoe, which uniquely combined a bar and a restaurant. Choosing to remain discreet, I parked the car at the far end of the parking lot, carefully observing the surroundings from the side. After everyone entered the establishment, I exited the car and took a leisurely stroll around the vicinity. It seemed prudent to gather as much information as possible about the place my wife frequented. The pub stood a distance away from other buildings, surrounded on all sides by a parking lot. 2 of its walls faced the street as the pub occupied a corner space, while the other 2 sides were marked by a neatly trimmed cedar fence standing 5 feet high, in front of which parking spaces were available. At that point, I noticed a black BMW from the group, the same one Lily had used to go to the restaurant the previous Friday. Surprisingly, it was now parked prominently in front of the cedar hedge, distinguishing it from the other cars parked outside the building. Upon closer examination, I realized that the building had 2 different entrances, one leading to the restaurant and the other to a bar situated at the back. Both the bar and the restaurant had fire doors intended strictly for emergencies. On the opposite side, where most of the cars were parked, there was an additional entrance. Moreover, there was another entrance leading to the bar, but Lily's company did not use it. Instead, they chose the entrance leading to the restaurant part of the building. Returning to the car, I retrieved the attire I had prepared for this occasion. Swiftly, I changed into a black windbreaker, donned a baseball cap, and put on glasses to alter my appearance. Finally, I inserted a protective prosthesis into my mouth to slightly modify my facial features, similar to a boxer's mouthguard. Despite its hindrance to speech and drinking, I paid no heed because my intention was not to engage in conversation or consume beverages. Glancing at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I reassured myself that I would remain unrecognizable. After patiently waiting for another hour in the car, I finally entered the bar. I spotted a group including my wife, sitting together near the dance floor enjoying drinks and having a good time. Among them were 6 women and 4 men, including my wife. Upon noticing that my wife was sitting in proximity to the same man she had dinner with the previous Friday, a wave of sadness and disappointment overwhelmed me. I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was something between them. Deciding to distance myself from the situation, I chose a table in the far corner, as far away from them as possible. From my vantage point, I began to closely observe the unfolding events. The spot I selected was dimly lit, occupied by several individuals nursing their sorrows, much like me. I was confident that no one would pay attention to me in this corner. In less than a few minutes, music began to play, luring people to the dance floor. Before I could turn away, I witnessed Lily dancing with a man seated next to her. Strange smiles appeared on the faces of the remaining 3 men at the table as they watched Lily and her partner dance. It became evident to me that Lily and this man were more than mere acquaintances, and everyone nearby was witnessing their dance. Several hours passed, and their group dwindled to Lily, another woman, and 2 men. Eventually, both couples found themselves on the dance floor, leaving no doubt to all present that my wife and this man were lovers. He drew Lily closer, placing his hands on her waist. They swayed on the dance floor with subtle movements, their bodies pressed closely together. In that moment, I witnessed him leaning down to kiss her, whispering something in her ear. I observed her nodding in response, and without hesitation, they left the room hand in hand. Intrigued, I discreetly followed them out into the dark street. I watched them walk hand in hand to his car. Keeping my distance, I observed them enter the back seat. It became clear why he had parked the car in the last row of the parking lot near the cedar hedge. He sought privacy and the absence of prying eyes. With no other cars nearby, the hedge acted as a shield for his vehicle, and he likely felt secure in that location. Curiosity consumed me as I contemplated their intentions. How far was Lily willing to go? Determined to uncover the truth, I cautiously headed to the opposite end of the parking lot. Stealthily, I made my way between parked cars, striving to remain unnoticed. Before I knew it, I was positioned next to the back of his black car. Initially, I noticed an absence of people inside. It crossed my mind that they were likely in the back seat. In the dim light near the hedge, I was certain they wouldn't spot me from inside the car. So I cautiously moved closer and leaned towards one of the rear windows. Unfortunately, the heavily tinted windows made it impossible to see anything. Despite the poor visibility, I could still hear muffled voices from inside the car. I wrestled with the decision of whether to intervene immediately and rescue her, or wait and catch Lily in the act of betrayal. The choice tormented me, but there was no time to make up my mind. As fate would have it, the car started rocking in rhythm with the music, which, to my dismay, happened to be my wife's favorite. My anger overwhelmed me, and without thinking, I yanked the door handle and flooded the car with light from the roof lantern. To my horror, I discovered my beloved wife, Lily, lying on her back with her lover atop her. They were engaged in their illicit activities. I quietly removed my glasses and the denture that concealed my true identity. As the car's interior lit up, Lily's eyes widened in shock and recognition. In seconds, her expression shifted from joy to utter disbelief. After a brief moment, she spoke, her voice trembling and uncertain. "Oh my God, Ron, please forgive me," she muttered. "Don't rush into decisions you'll regret. It meant nothing to me. Just wait for me." I closed the door firmly behind me and swiftly headed to my car. As I drove away from the parking lot, Lily was already chasing after me, urgently pleading for me to wait. Less than 5 minutes later, she arrived home in a disheveled state, tears filling her eyes. "Oh my God, honey, I'm so sorry," she pleaded. "I love you more than anything in the world. I understand that I hurt you, Lily. You broke our marriage vows. In our 15 years together, I've never betrayed you. If I'd known you were cheating, maybe I'd have sought comfort elsewhere too. If fidelity doesn't matter in our marriage, perhaps I'd have sought fleeting pleasures," I said, my voice laced with anger. "Ron, please hear me out. I love you with all my heart. What I did didn't matter to me at all. I wish I could turn back time and fix everything. But it's impossible. You have to believe that you are my world. If you compare my life with yours and our 2 daughters, it doesn't matter at all." Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to contain her emotions, burying her face in her hands as if searching for salvation. Eventually, her legs gave way and she sank onto the sofa, continuing to express her remorse repeatedly. "Stop apologizing," I said sternly. "What you did to our marriage is unforgivable. Tell me who he is and how long this betrayal has been going on," I said, relieved that she was no longer standing right in front of me. My anger surged as I grabbed her by the neck and shook her, an unfamiliar rage taking hold of me. "His name is Nick," she confessed, her voice trembling. "He's a colleague from the studio. This shouldn't have happened. Please believe that I love you more than anything." But then a terrible thought crossed my mind. "But you must admit your deception," I retorted. "You've been lying to me about your outings with friends while secretly seeing him for years. Do you expect me to believe you haven't been deceiving me all this time?" In a panic, she exclaimed, "Oh my God, no. This happened only recently. Please believe me. My love for you has only grown stronger over time. I beg for your forgiveness and understanding. There was never any genuine love in my actions." Tears welled up in her eyes again, her disheveled appearance and swollen red eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. She pleaded for forgiveness. "No, you don't grasp the seriousness of this situation," I replied, disappointment evident in my voice. "Think about your colleagues who witnessed your affair. Think about us. Consider how others will perceive us if they see us together, whether on the street or at the office. It's not just a secret affair anymore. It's a blatant display of infidelity. You've publicly betrayed me. I'm sorry, but I can't bear this humiliation, and I want a divorce." I was resolute in my decision to end our marriage. "Ron, please, I'm begging you, forgive me. You know I can't live without you. Please reconsider. I'm genuinely asking for your forgiveness. I promise it won't happen again. Right now, our priority is saving our marriage and protecting our family." As she spoke, I stood up and turned away, needing some solitude to think about our relationship. "Lily, our marriage started falling apart when you chose to be unfaithful. The consequences we're facing today stem from that betrayal." Suddenly, a sharp scream pierced the room, followed by sorrowful crying that deeply affected me. When I looked back at Lily, she was on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably with her head in her hands. In that moment, conflicting emotions swirled within me. I wanted to embrace her, offer comfort, but anger and a sense of betrayal prevented me from doing so. I felt incapable of staying close to her, unsure if I could trust myself around her. Silently, I left our home and sought refuge for the night in a hotel room. I couldn't sleep, and my rest was restless and empty. Come morning, I decided to inform my secretary that I wouldn't be coming to work that day. I stayed in my hotel room until noon, pondering the events that had unfolded. Eventually, I managed to work up an appetite and dined sparingly in the hotel restaurant. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the office. Along the way, I couldn't help but glance towards my house. To my dismay, there was a green Toyota parked in front, and this unfamiliar presence heightened my anxiety. I concluded that the green Toyota belonged to Frances, Lily's sister. It was somewhat comforting to think that, in addition to their unfaithful mother, my daughters could rely on their aunt for support. However, I was still unaware of Lily's deteriorating condition. After I left home the previous evening, Lily had confided in her sister over the phone. The severity of the situation overwhelmed her, leading to a sudden breakdown. Now she was in the hospital, grappling with the aftermath of her emotional breakdown. It wasn't until I arrived at my office that I received the news. I received a call from Lily's sister, Francine, and we had a lengthy conversation. According to her, Lily was in an extremely critical condition, constantly in tears and anxious. What shocked me was that less than an hour after I had left the previous evening, my elder daughter had reached out to Francine, informing her that Lily was delusional and I was absent. After their conversation, Francine hurried to my house and witnessed the dire state of her sister. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, she wasted no time in calling an ambulance for emergency medical assistance. Francine assured me that she would stay at my house to care for and support my two daughters during this challenging time. She strongly urged me to visit my wife at Santa Maria City Hospital. When our conversation ended, I was overwhelmed by shock. I realized how selfish and dismissive I had been the night before. The weight of my actions, or lack thereof, weighed heavily on me. Did I truly decide to leave my home, abandoning my daughters and wife when they needed support the most? Maybe. But one thing was clear to me. If I had stayed with her that evening, there was a disturbing possibility, however small, that my emotions could have led to cruelty due to the immense pain caused by her actions. While she may have played a significant role in the breakdown of our marriage, I had never considered myself a person who ignored problems or avoided facing them directly until yesterday. Was that what I did? In this situation, Lily and I were confronted with a monumental issue, certainly a significant one. But was leaving my family when they needed me the most the only way to justify my decision? Regret and guilt overwhelmed me, intensifying my sense of sadness. Tears streamed down my face as I hid behind the table. Deep down, I wondered if there might have been an alternative path, a path of forgiveness, reconciliation, and perhaps even a distant chance to salvage what remained of our relationship. Of course, the fact that we were in this situation was the result of Lily's actions. She bore full responsibility for betraying the sacred trust that should have been reserved solely for me. But the thought of ending our marriage weighed heavily on my heart, knowing it would cause great pain to my two beloved daughters. It became evident that I needed to explore an alternative solution, and I contemplated the idea of forgiveness. Gradually, as I processed the shocking news of Lily's hospitalization, I found a renewed determination. Without hesitation, I got behind the wheel and raced to the hospital, determined to uncover the truth about her actions and understand the situation. Doubt filled my mind, and I entered the hospital without a clear plan or knowing what I would say to Lily. But one thing remained certain. I was determined to seek the truth. As I sat in the hospital, I reflected on a piece of wisdom my mother had once imparted to me. Cheaters always eventually face the consequences of their actions. This idea still lingers in my mind as I think back to my wife's betrayal when she was just 20 years old. Lily and I got married, and our once happy marriage seemed like a dream come true. Our two beloved daughters brought us joy, and our comfortable home in a lovely neighborhood was a symbol of contentment. We didn't have financial troubles, and most importantly, our love was undeniable. However, life took an unexpected turn when, shortly after our younger daughter turned 6, Lily landed a job at a nearby film studio. With her proficiency in multiple foreign languages, she secured a position as a film translator. Her work as a voice translator was truly impressive, providing us with financial stability due to her impeccable skills. For 5 years, my wife excelled in her role until a new translator arrived. This tall, charismatic, blonde-haired colleague quickly became the center of attention among the studio staff. Despite the many admirers he had, he seemed oblivious to their affection. He shared Lily's proficiency in various foreign languages, leading to frequent encounters at work and the blossoming of a friendship that soon deepened. Herein lay the problem that troubled my wife's heart. Love surreptitiously crept into her emotions before she fully comprehended it, leaving her in a state of confusion. Before long, she realized she had fallen for him. Initially, he treated her no differently than other coworkers, focusing on work-related matters and maintaining a professional rapport. But when he began joining their bi-weekly outings, a subtle shift occurred. Gradually, they crossed the line from professional collaboration to a deep friendship. They confided in each other and shared the intricacies of their lives. Lily never discussed any of this with me. Soon, he became a regular presence at gatherings and dinners among their female colleagues. Her first mistake was not informing me when men started attending their gatherings. With time, their connection evolved into something more profound. On the dance floor, swaying to slow songs, they felt like a single entity. However, I remained oblivious to the depth of their relationship. In a dimly lit corner of the dance floor, Lily found herself locked in his embrace, and their lips met in a kiss that was more than just friendly. It was a kiss that shook her to the core. And so, a chain of events was set in motion. The following Friday, during one of their outings, he found a reason to take her away from the pub, ultimately leading to a passionate encounter in his car. Their desires grew, and they soon found themselves entangled like wild creatures in the back seat. Overwhelmed by guilt upon returning home, Lily was determined to give me the love and affection I deserved, unaware that as her husband, I deserved unwavering loyalty. However, due to their daily interactions at work, it became increasingly challenging for her to distance herself from him. They had grown too comfortable in each other's presence. But Lily's love for me remained steadfast. I was willing to sacrifice everything for Ron because my love for him remained unshakable. Lily never intended to hurt me through her infidelity, but she was gravely mistaken in believing that her connection with him surpassed the bond we shared. This affair continued for 4 months, and now she lay in a hospital bed revealing all the details of her betrayal. I listened, shedding tears without interruption. Lily vowed to do whatever it took to save our marriage. However, I couldn't decide whether I could live with the memories of her infidelity, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. After all, my beloved wife was in a fragile emotional and physical state, and I didn't want to inflict further pain on her. So I returned to my hotel room and contacted my lawyer, asking him to prepare the necessary divorce documents. I was deeply concerned about how the divorce would impact Lily's condition. I didn't want her to suffer, but it seemed inevitable. While the divorce papers were being prepared, I spent quality time with my beloved daughters. I didn't plan to seek custody. Instead, Lily and I should jointly raise them, albeit not under the same roof. However, my plans unraveled when my lawyer delivered the divorce papers to Lily, who was still in the hospital. Her emotional state worsened upon learning of the divorce, and that dreadful day marked a turning point for the worse. She suffered a stroke when she realized I had initiated divorce proceedings. When her doctor informed me of this, I began to despise myself. I should have waited to proceed with the divorce until Lily had fully recovered. I spent 3 days by her side, holding her hand. Lily's condition deteriorated, and even after 2 months she only showed partial improvement. She was left paralyzed on her left side, and it was a heartbreaking situation for all of us. I blamed myself entirely, but at the same time I understood that if Lily hadn't engaged in a secret affair with her colleague, none of this would have happened. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself to stay in the same house with Lily and our daughters, I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at her, I would be reminded of that scene of betrayal in the car. So, I packed my belongings and moved into a nearby rented apartment to stay close to my beautiful daughters. As much as I didn't want it to be this way, it was Lily herself who had turned our once happy life into chaos and suffering.